Hey, John, what's going on, man?
Not much, Mike. How are you?
It's good to see you, buddy. It's
It's
been
good
a
to see
while.
you too. Yeah, for sure. It's good to catch up.
So, we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to ask you what's a day in the life of a mental performance coach in Major League Baseball like?
You know, I found myself wearing multiple hats. Um, you know, because of my experience on the field. I'm doing a lot of things on the field, and it's just really trying to find those organic touch points where you can, do several things. It's either build relationships. Um,
Hmm.
that's probably the biggest thing that I do, and just continuing to kind of build off of the conversations we have. And then there's also the work. It's we only get certain amount of time, so you got to be ready to work with a 5 minute conversation, because sometimes that's all you get at the beginning. So really just navigating that environment of, okay, I don't have these set one-on-one sessions. um, it ultimately gets there, but at first it's like just being around, observing, um, and then it's a resource needed, not a resource forced. So we really go by the pace of the athletes. They're the expert on themselves, so we kind of let them, they know what they need. Sometimes they just need a little bit of help getting it out, but it's usually just hanging out, um, being intentional in our work, uh, being laser focused, and you know, giving them stuff that they could use to get better on the field.
So, I mean, every athlete obviously is different, right? Has different needs, like you said, and they have, I'm sure, different personalities and different, sort of points of view on the work that you're doing. Like, but on average, like what's sort of like the timeline for getting someone to buy into working with a mental performance coach?
That's a great question. It depends on the motivation, I think, to apply the work. Sometimes it comes quickly, sometimes slowly. Um, but yeah, it's different depending on the clutter. I would say, like, how much is there really the self-awareness to realize that this can benefit them. And sometimes the awareness is low, and sometimes the awareness is like, I can really benefit from this. So it really varies, and it takes patience. Either way, some of the hungrier guys, it's okay, let's not bite off more than we can chew. The other ones, it's like they have no foundation. So it's really meeting them where they're at, um, not trying to fix it, not try to force it, but just be there with them, and really be intentional in knowing where they're at.
So, how many of your athletes, I mean, you can answer this however you want, but how many would you say or guess that have some exposure to mental performance coaching before they come into the organization?
I think as the drafts kind of go on, I think colleges are doing a better job of supplying or supporting the athletes from a mental performance standpoint. So there's some guys that are coming in with, either someone came in to talk to them frequently, or they had their head coach kind of make it an emphasis, or, some places had counselors, so it varies. But I think the players, especially college players, are having more of a fundamental understanding of what mental performance is and how to have a routine that has that kind of stuff seeped in.
Yeah, I would imagine it makes the work easier, right? In terms of if there's some exposure to it before they come into the organization. Obviously, the way that the Blue Jays do it is going to be much more sophisticated on balance and probably they might have experienced in college or even high school. But, at the end of the day, it's the same idea, right? Like players who are kind of coming towards you saying, I need help or I want help, got to make the job a bit easier versus having to get them to buy in without having any exposure to it.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a help standpoint. It's just a enhancing performance. They know that this is something they need, and something they
Mm.
don't work as much as they want to. So there are cases where they're like, I need help, like I'm kind of lost. But there's other guys that are just like, hey, like I'm just trying. I know this is important. How can I do a better job of it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? You said use the word motivation, and I'm finding that in my practice, right? I have the most success with clients who are motivated, right? They're motivated to show up, to invest, to do the work. Uh, and if clients are not motivated, they're probably not going to do what they need to do in the process to get better, at least in the short term, right? It usually becomes, well, I'm having an issue or I'm having a problem or I'm in a slump or I'm in my head when they come forward and say like, hey, can you help me? Which obviously isn't always ideal to put that, band-aid on it, as I would say, right? So like what sort of messaging is the organization giving or do you give as a coach individually to say, hey, like you got to work on this all the time, regardless of whether you're going great or your head's in the tank.
The biggest thing for me is applying it on field stuff. If they
Yeah.
can't see that connection, they're going to be out. But this might not answer the question, but it's a law of thirds, right? There's going to be the bottom half that are not really, or the bottom third that are not really motivated. Then you got some guys that are a little bit ambivalent, and then you got the guys that are really into it. And I think as you as you start to work with the on the ambivalence with the, which means they feel two different ways about something, where they're kind of knowing that they need it, but they're also like, I don't want to do it. Once you kind of help those guys out, the goal is to kind of by them being exposed to it, that bottom third can say, okay, maybe maybe there is something to it. Um, so yeah, I think the biggest message is whatever I'm doing, I'm connecting it to this can help you be better on the field, and then a byproduct of that. And what's most important to me is off the field, who they are as a person, like identity stuff. Really, the where the awareness really has to come in, where you understand your values. So there's certain ways to get to that, and I mean, some people don't want that, right? So it's once again meeting them where they're at. But I think that I really try to meet them as a person rather than a player. But sometimes you're going through performance to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think the rule of thirds is a great way to characterize it because I think I see the same thing as well, right? Not everybody is going to be engaged or into it or you see the value in it and there's really nothing you could do about it. Then you've kind of got that one third in the middle that could go either way, like you said, and then you got the one third who's like all in, and you just got to think about how to invest your resources too. I imagine your time's not infinite, right? So you're probably gravitating towards the players who are really engaged in it because that's where you're going to get the most out of the process, rather than trying to convince somebody that this is something you should be doing, and they're not buying it.
Yeah, and I don't want to not give that support and resource to those players. I've had plenty of times where I've gone up to a player and be like, "Hey, what's your experience with mental performance?" And like, "No, I got it. I'm good." I'm like, "Great, okay, that's awesome." Other guys, I'm like, we're getting some group together to do some breath work or mindfulness, and I invite some guy just off the hip, just be like, "Hey, you want to come join us?" And he's like, "No." Right? And then another guy is like, "Hey, have you ever really incorporated mental performance into your bullpens?" And they're like, "No." And then I kind of get into this awareness of just like, what are you thinking when you're on the mound? And they're like, nothing. So when you get those kind of answers, it's like, okay, there's this resistance, and instead of like telling them, "Hey, you really need this," it's like rolling with that and being really patient and getting to know them, and finding a way to connect
Yeah.
in a non-forceful way. So, and all those three examples, those guys we ended up working together. One guy took a year, to really open up. Another one, another guy by the end of this 5 months, it's like it comes, sometimes quick, sometimes slow, like I said.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's like the old, John Wooden quote, right? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And if you're being consistently showing up for them and being present and making an effort to get to know them and watch them and maybe point something out here and there, or you're sort of observing and you help them, right? Like that's going to help build the trust, right? Because you're not just saying, well, you know what, I'm going to write this guy off because he said no. I'm going to stick it out and make sure that he knows that give a shit about him, frankly, and that's going to help build the relationship and ultimately earn their trust. And that, I think that's probably the thing I miss the most being being in the dugout, is just that like ability to be there all the time and not have to do anything but watch sometimes, because, in private practice, you don't always get the ability to observe the athletes you work with, which is a detriment. It's a real deficiency. Um, it's a hard thing to compensate for, because they tell you one thing and you have to take them at their face value. But if you don't see, sometimes you see something totally different and you're like, well, hold on, like you're telling me this, but this is what I see. And
Mm.
like that's a big part of practice, is being able to see something that they can't see.
In my limited experience working with private clients, private athletes, especially the younger, younger athletes, they'll tell you what's going on, but like it's always not false, but more so a limited. They don't really, they think they're doing it, but they're really not. So I would work with the player, but then I was also in touch with the dad and the coach, and I was getting mixed messages. And it's that gentle confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing it, it's very hard for you to bring that up. Hey, I noticed something that we've been working on, but it's not really showing up on the field. What's going on? Or so I kind of I understand that struggle, and I also see
Mm-hmm.
the benefits. I've also I don't take it for granted the fact that I can be around more frequently. In the last couple of years, just being around the guys on a day to day basis, not feeling you need to do the work, even though sometimes you're like, what the heck am I doing here? Am I even a mental performance coach?
Yep.
But the second I feel that, um, the I kind of just embrace it instead of forcing it and like being like, I need to do this. It's like, okay, be be patient, be
Yeah.
kind to yourself. The work will come. Just kind of make the most of where you're at.
Yeah. I completely relate to that, because in my practice, right, there's some days, and I was saying to you off, before we started recording, is like there's some days where you're working all day and nothing happens. And you're like, is it even like, why did I even do this? Right. But the way I help reframe it for myself is I'm investing, right? I'm investing my time, and it's going to be an asset and it's going to pay off, right? And it's the same concept for you, right? Being there is not just because you're not doing anything doesn't mean it's not valuable, right? It just means that it hasn't paid off yet. And I think that's what you just described, which is like, hey, I'm there, I'm watching, I'm there, I'm present, and tomorrow it's going to pay a dividend. It just hasn't paid a dividend today. But when you're in it, you feel like, what's my purpose here? I'm useless.
Yeah, and
Like,
I,
what am I
I
doing here?
and I think that's a lot of the work, just patience. You hear that saying, and I'm stealing this. This is not something I've made up, but like
Mhm.
you hear that saying, don't just sit there, do something. A lot of times it's don't just do something, sit there.
Mm.
And I think that is something that's really important in the work, especially when you're dealing with motivation or, getting these guys to trust you. You don't, you can't expect a guy to talk to their mental performance coach or go to a mental health professional every day of their lives. It's usually
Right.
once a week, by month, whatever. So sometimes you need to, like, I can't do that either, So it's like understanding those break times. How are you going to recharge for yourself? How are you going to practice what you preach by when there isn't something going on? How are you getting better? And I think
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing from a physical and mental standpoint. Like, it's compound interest. Sometimes you don't really see the effects of the work you're doing until later. And that's like trusting the process, right? So I have to do the same thing because I would never tell an athlete to do something that I haven't done myself.
Mhm.
Um, I just wouldn't
Agreed.
do it. And I think my experience as a ball player helps as well. But you mentioned it earlier, that consistently showing up and being, short and punchy and giving them everything they need and
Yeah.
nothing they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was going to be my next question. So you sort of headed me off at the pass here. Like, how much does your experience as a major league player impact what you do, for good or maybe for not so good?
Well, I never tell players that I played. Um, it's just not my style. I don't want to lead with it because it's all about them, and I want to kind of know them and get them to get to know me and want to be around me without that.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, like that is the biggest advantage I have is being able to play because I get that street cred, I guess, right off the bat.
Hmm.
But I don't rely on that. I know that that might get me in the door, but what gets me like that relationship is me, right? So obviously the playing aspect helps, and guys are just like, okay, I can talk to that dude just because he's been there,
Hmm.
but I also have to deliver. No one wants to hear stories about back when I played. This is what it was like, or this is what I did. That just doesn't go far. They need to be able to apply what's going on to their lives.
You there?
Yeah, I think we broke up a little
You
bit.
broke up a bit. So I've never really had done this or had to do it, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to ask you the question again, and we'll just edit out that part, see if we can get through it. But so I'll ask that same question if you could just kind of restart. So how is your experience as a Major League Baseball player like helped or maybe hurt or not helped your work?
Yeah, so I never really lead with the fact that I played.
Mhm.
They end up finding out one way or another, but I think uh, I don't force this, but I think I have tried to embody this is this humility of,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter that I played, I'm here for you. And, by nature, I'm going to get that extra additional buy in because I did play. And I think players are like, hey, this guy knows what's up because he's been there. But there's by no means do I rely on my career or say, hey, when I played, this is what I did. Guys naturally ask questions, but I also, sometimes be like, hey, what do you think? Like if they ask me a certain question about what do you do when you really felt the pressure or you kind of got distracted, I'm like, what do you think I did? So regardless of my playing career, it gets me through the door. But as far as building that relationship, that becomes part of like who I am and how I go about the work.
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing, right? It's a very fine line between establishing the credibility of like, hey, I know this game and I've been in your shoes versus making it about you and not them, because that can turn somebody off in any context really fast. Right. So, I mean, I guess it's something you probably think about all the time. So, you know, one thing is I struggle with in my practice or have at least in the time that I've been doing this is, how and when to kind of use self-disclosure, right? To tell people about my own experiences. Is that something that comes up for you in terms of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think at first when I first started off, there's a lot of times where I would think of situations and really um, like my first reaction is like, oh, I've been there. Let me tell them what I did. But I think now I've learned to uh, balance my experience with the schooling and the that actual work, and it actually helps me empathize. That empathy is a big piece. Being like, and I'm able to feel that emotion because even though our experiences are different, I think the underlying emotion is there, and I think that allows me to meet like to put myself in their shoes, but to make it about them. Because I can feel that struggle because
Mm-hmm.
I've been there, but ultimately it's not about my struggle; it's about their struggle. So it's like I can feel the emotions. I know that feeling, but I don't try to I really don't put it on my career.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you talked about, like you mentioned briefly, the mindfulness or breathing exercises. Like, what are some of the skills that you are teaching on a day-to-day basis with the players? And obviously it varies by person and situation, but like just in general, like what are some of the things you're teaching?
So as a department, mental performance, we kind of operate out of kind of three buckets. One is acceptance commitment training, where we really work on accepting thoughts and feelings and stuff as they are, not really being happy with them, but understanding that, there's a lot of things out of our control and we're going to think all the time. So it's more of accepting that. And then, how do we get to committed action? So there's this mindfulness piece of spending time with the moment and kind of seeing it how it unravels and not trying to change anything, but that ends up helping players get to this point of knowing what they need to do to get better. Um, that's one thing. And then the idea of motivational interviewing, this kind of working with players who are kind of stuck in this in between when they're trying to make a behavioral change. You know, is it something, should I stay where I'm at or do I make this change? And sometimes that can be scary. So really helping people navigate that space. And then, and then there's, the more like the breath work, just really
Hmm.
working on like either it's Wim Hof or, box breathing or whiskey breath, like a lot of those things. So we do a lot of different recovery, like modalities. Yeah, so it works different. And then it's more the uh, bibliotherapy where we just read a book and these stories, they can kind of input themselves in, like
That's
place themselves
interesting.
in the story. And, that's more of I've had some really cool conversations where there's this like natural, we'll go into a Ryan Holiday book or Chop Wood Carry Water. And these
Yes.
guys can like, it's such a cool thing where we dive into chapters and I kind of bring questions to them and they kind of go for it. Did we break up again?
Yeah, you did. So if you just start with like Ryan Holiday, I could probably make it out. So say like Ryan Holiday book or Chop Wood Carry Water, and then keep going.
Yeah, so books like Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, Courage is Calling uh, by Ron Holiday. These books are short chapters, and the guys can kind of take things away from it that are kind of like applicable, and they can like be like, okay, this makes sense, and just using questions to kind of draw that kind of stuff out.
That's something that I have not done a lot of, but I've thought about a lot into the bibliotherapy. Right, reading a book is a way to implement the strategies and understand how it works. Right, so Chop Wood Carry Water is a great example of a book that one of my clients who's now a sophomore pitching at Duke, I use that with him because Duke's pitching coach was on a podcast who's now with, I think he's with the Cardinals, Dusty Blake, but he talked about that book and they used that book with incoming freshmen at Duke. And I read the book and I was just like, this book is absolutely ideal to use with any athlete because it's about the process of being great and the struggle and the story is it's short, but it's amazing. It applies to the journey of any athlete where they can put themselves in that character's shoes and say like, oh, this is what it looks like for me. It's not going to happen today or tomorrow or this year. It's going to take 4 years, 10 years, 15 years to get to where I want to go. And if I don't embrace that process, it's going to be really hard for me to get to where I want to be because it's just going to beat me down.
For sure. And that book has so many great, like, I guess, skills, right? It talks about authenticity, values, talks about gratitude, it talks about trusting the process, overcoming
Mm-hmm.
failure, being content with where you are when you're battling where you want to be. And then ultimately, you find yourself being both. You feel yourself being John and you feel yourself being the sensei. You ultimately want to be your own sensei. So that's a really cool book to dive into, and
Mm-hmm.
I've done it a couple of times where it's been in a camp setting or just a couple guys going through post-op from Tommy John. It's just
Mm-hmm.
these things that when you're not doing as much work on field, you can really utilize the time and get into a book and yeah, I love it. That's probably one of my favorite things to do with players. Um, so yeah.
It's a good reminder to me that's something I should be doing more of. And I think that book is a staple. I love Ryan Holiday too, and I think those books are incredible in terms of the messaging about really embracing challenges and using them to as the path to improvement versus looking at it as a roadblock that's going to stop you from doing something. Um, so I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit now. So talk to me about your time as a player, right? As a younger player, right? High school, college, like what did that look like for you in terms of, where you wanted to be, the way you thought about things, your process, recruiting, all those stuff? I'm just kind of a big question, but like just tell me about some of that stuff you went through when you were a younger lad.
Yeah, I mean, I was never the standout player in high school. There was if I went to a showcase or even my junior and senior year of high school, there was always guys that were, I know that's the only way I can put it. There was, these uber prospects that were going to go first round, and I was kind of there. I loved the game. I was passionate about it. I might have been limited by my strength and my stuff at that time, but luckily, I mean, long story short, I was at a tournament where everybody was there to see the starter, and I came in and did well, and that's how I got my shot uh, with Siena College. And kind of same process. And in college, I wasn't the dude. I got like a partial scholarship. There was guys on full rides, and I just showed what I could do. And ultimately, my junior year of college, I pitched in the first game of the MAC tournament, and a scout was there from the Nationals, and I did well. So from there, I think that's the game that really got me drafted. And then again, I got into pro ball, and I wasn't the guy again. And my first 2 years, I struggled. I wanted to be out. Like I was looking at internships. I was, just it wasn't apparent to me that I was, gonna make it. Uh, but I had some support. I can remember one phone call from that same scout that drafted me or was very instrumental in that. And he said, "Hey,
Yeah.
man, we want you to come out to early spring training, and we believe you can kind of do some really great things for this organization and make it to the big league." So that kind of vote of confidence really helped.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to I think what we were talking about before, feedback, right? Having somebody validate the idea that all the work and energy and effort you've put into a process is paying off at some level. Because if you don't get that feedback from some, it, listen, we all want to be internally motivated completely, right? We want to wake up every day and say, I'm going to go out and do this. But like the truth of the matter is it's just not sustainable, right? In a lot of levels. And to have somebody make that phone call and tell you like, hey, we believe in you is really important. So how did that sort of, I mean, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but how did that underdog mentality help you as a player?
I mean, it kept me hungry. Um, I got used to using doubt uh, to motivate me. And, we talked about it earlier. It's like
Mm-hmm.
before the podcast started, like that's a pretty good motivator, doubt, as long as it's processed the right way. And I think that's what we focus on with players, like not trying
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of doubt, but understanding what that feeling is trying to tell you and how it can be used and helpful. Um, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't understand that process,
Mm-hmm.
but it, but that's what it was. Like there was that doubt, but I kept on going and I kept on doing what I could. And then it'd be like these little things would happen, like, oh, I'm getting drafted. Oh, I'm going to the big leagues. It's like I didn't see it coming at all because like I was so focused on, doing everything I can because I always doubted that I would make it, from that because everybody doubted me for so long.
Uh-huh. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying before about the philosophical approach of the Blue Jays in terms of mental performance, which is to say, you know yourself best. I mean, what I was thinking when you were saying, giving that answer was like you were your own mental performance coach.
Yeah, I think I was. And then I worked with somebody too, right before I did get, called into the big leagues that off season. My dad noticed that I was struggling uh, in low A. Every time a guy got on base, that guy was scoring in my head. I was like, guy got on. It's like there's nothing I can do. So I really started focusing on the mental aspect, and it just paid off. We kept it simple. It was like breathing, rhythm, posture. Like those
Mm-hmm.
are the only things you can really control. And with some help from a uh, mechanical standpoint, I just went with it. So yeah, I kind of was, but from a very basic understanding, I kind of didn't overthink about it either. It's like, how do you think about your thinking and then not?
Yeah.
So um, that's where they're at because we want to do those skills off the field. But once you get on the field, it's like, no, I'm going to fully commit. I'm fully going to trust and just let it all on the line. And I think balance, you can't use those skills that you use off the field on the field.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's to me, that's probably in working with young people. And I guess the people that I work with maybe are a little bit younger in general. High school kids are a little bit younger than what you're dealing with in the system. But to me, that's one of the hardest things to teach is that commitment process, right? The acceptance commitment process, because so many young athletes are so programmed to respond to results. And there's this underlying perfectionism in almost every athlete that I deal with. They can't, it's hard, they can, but it's hard for them to really embrace, at least up front, the idea of just committing to the process and letting go of the result, which the paradox is that if you do that, you're probably going to get better results. But they can't let go of the result. And so unwinding that becomes really, really difficult at times. I mean, do you see any of that in your work?
Well, I see it in myself. Like,
True, me too.
yeah. And then I see it in my son, who's 8 and
Mm,
playing baseball, and it's all this outcome. And I think we're naturally going to look at that because it's what we can see.
yep.
It's like, I'm going to do this, and if I'm good at it, I'm going to feel better about it. But if I'm struggling and I don't see the results right away, I think naturally we're going to like want to not do it.
Hmm.
So I think the place you need to we try to get to, especially with myself, is all right. I did everything I could up to this point. Now it's out of my hands. Like I need to completely trust it. If I fall flat on my face, I'll learn from it, right? But until I get to the point where I can completely let go, I can't really make the most of the moment.
Yeah. And I think you touch on a really good point, as I'm reflecting on some of the stuff that I do with my clients, and I tell them this a lot, is to say, like, have you really done everything you can do? Right. And I don't think a lot of times they can answer that question honestly and say yes. Right. And so I'll say, if you don't do this thing, it's okay. Right. That's your choice. But don't be surprised when the result's not what you want it to be. And I think that gives them the permission to look at the situation and say, like, do I really want to do this? Right. Because you know what? Like, it's not my job. I'm not a coach. I'm not there to like make them perform a certain way and get a result because I'm looking for a W. Like, that's not what I do. And I think that that's one of the beauties of the work that we do, which is to say, hey, listen, man, it's your choice. It's your life. You can do whatever you want, but you got to look at it honestly and say, like, am I doing everything I can? And the ones that do probably get to that point faster where they could say, like, you know what, man, I've been doing everything I can, and now I'm just going to let it rip. Versus the ones that know subconsciously at a minimum, hey, like, I could probably be better at this, but I'm not doing it. So like, I shouldn't expect anything differently.
Yeah, and I think we can't promise results. Um, I just that's the biggest, that's the holy grail, right? How can you show that the work you're doing is ultimately impacting performance?
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get to a point where, regardless of the results, you could be at peace with it and process the failures in a helpful way.
Yeah. It's funny. I was reading an article, a study recently, exactly on that. So it was a study. I don't know. You may have seen it actually, given that you're in the organization, but it was a study about, and I think it was a thesis, so maybe not, about what's the benefit of working with a mental performance coach in professional baseball. Like that was the foundation of the study. And what it found was it doesn't statistically, it doesn't improve performance, but what it does improve statistically significant is duration of career. What does that mean? The study basically said people who work with mental performance coaches got better at enduring failure and dealing with the adversity, and their careers were 2.5 years longer in systems because of it. And so that's exactly what you just described, right? We can't guarantee results, but we can make people mentally tougher, if you want to use that phrase, which I don't love, but just sort of came out to stick it out, because baseball is, to use a cliche, a game of failure. And if you can't deal with the adversity and the failure that comes with it, you're going to burn out and you're going to be like, screw this, I'm moving on because I can't take the way that it makes me feel.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's helping them see what the right choice is, right? Because our choices matter. And
Yes.
we do that through clearing out all the clutter and not getting too focused on what happened and what's going to happen. It's like, what's the best choice? What can I do now to make me better? And I think that's what makes your career kind of go as long as it's supposed to, is because you're making the right choices from a clear
Hmm.
mind and uncluttered heart. It's like clear mind, focused heart, whatever, however you want to say it. It ultimately leads you to make better choices.
Hmm.
And when you make better choices, you're ultimately gonna make the most of whatever, and it might extend your career by a couple of years.
Yeah. How much work do you do with purpose in terms of understanding why players are doing what they're doing in your work?
I would hope it's all the work I'm doing. There's never a conversation that I'm looking at. You know, what's the purpose of this conversation?
Right.
Uh, how am I using this time wisely?
Hmm.
As the relationship develop, I think it's okay to be like, there's really nothing really to work towards. I'm just gonna be here and be comfortable with, this is just a conversation. There's other times where this light bulb goes on and I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity to help them see how they can
Hmm.
get better. And that's when the purpose really comes out. But I think everything has some intent, some purpose behind it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. You mentioned your son, you mentioned your father. So I'm curious about your relationship with your dad and what that looked like, or your parents, what that looked like as you were developing as a baseball player, right? Like what their role was, how they handled things. That's such a big part of the work that I'm doing in terms of understanding parent child relationships. It's a big driver of how I get clients. It's a big driver of like how I, work with my kids to see that relationship. It has a huge influence. So what did that look like for you when you were growing up?
My parents did everything they could to make sure I was making the most out of my talents. They noticed something
Mhm.
and they cultivated that. The only thing that, my parents did their best, right?
Yep.
When I did face obstacles or challenges, they helped me
Mhm.
like more than they probably should have. If I, you know, not to get too much into, the troubles I had as a kid, but they really did a lot for me. And I relied on that, so even though I might have had the initial feelings of that, I never really learned how to cope with that or process it in a helpful way. So when I did meet obstacles later on that might be a little bit heavier, I didn't have the skills to handle that. So, like I said, my parents did their best to support me, but sometimes that looked like they were kind of, like a Zamboni. They were just clearing the path ahead of me
Mhm.
where everything was smooth sailing and kept me like super focused, but I didn't deal with anything else. Whereas
Yeah.
my son, I want him to a fault to experience that and
Yes.
and be there to support him, but through finding the strength within him
Yeah.
to be able to overcome that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I listen, and I think that for any parent, myself included, that's the biggest struggle we have. We want the best for our children, and to get to a place where we could step back, and I like to use the phrase take our hands off the wheel and let them just go through the crap and deal with it and process it their own way without trying to get over involved. I mean, it's really hard to stay out of it, right? And so, I see that all the time, and it's like you want to give your kids the best resources and you want to make sure that they're doing everything they can to get to where they want to go, but at some point you can overdo it, right? And almost do a disservice because you don't know how to deal with it on your own. How did that, specifically when you left home and went to college, how did that manifest itself? That sort of like, now I'm on my own and I got to figure this stuff out and my parents aren't here, and like, was it like, did it change?
When I first heard you were doing this, I loved it because I think that was something that I really battled with.
Yeah.
I The transition from high school to college, like I had this freedom that I didn't know what to do with it. And without my parents kind of keeping me in check, I was just kind of,
Hmm.
didn't have direction when I first started college. Um, it took me a couple years to kind of make that uh, transition, but I ran into some trouble in my college career.
Hmm.
Did we break up again?
Yeah. So you just start with, I ran into some trouble.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's storms going on, and it's just the internet keeps on kicking out a little
Yeah.
bit. Um, start where?
I ran into some trouble.
Yeah, I think I ran into some trouble because that freedom, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have those healthy boundaries to know like this is what you shouldn't do and this is
Hmm.
what you probably should do. It took me a while, and yeah, if I kind of had some skills going into college and knew how to navigate that freedom, I think I would have. I don't want to change anything, but
Hmm.
looking back, there's obviously things I knew I could have done better.
Yeah. I mean, that was always my hypothesis, but you know, everybody's different. And it's a lot easier to look back in retrospect and say, oh, I wish I would have had this versus like now it's like, well, why do I need this? And I think that that's a struggle in the work that we do. I think in general is that idea that we've got to prepare for things that are to come. And if we don't know what's to come, you've got to put faith in the process that I'm preparing for something. And I think if you can't see it, to sort of use your example before about baseball, like if you can't see the results, like what the hell, right? I think if you can't see what the future has to hold, like what am I preparing for? Like, well, if I work on my swing I swing the bat 1,000 times, or I throw 100 pitches today. Well, I know I got better. But if I put in 50 mental reps, what's it going to do for me? I have no idea, right? So we
Yeah,
just gravitate to the tangible.
and being on the other side of playing, I realized that a lot of my failures are helping me more than any of my successes.
Mhm.
And it puts things hopefully in perspective that my sport identity is not everything, and that what I'm going through
Yeah.
now is ultimately going to make me a better husband, father, brother, son, whatever your other roles are in your next job. Because you went through what you did through in sport, whether you handle it the right way or not, that experience is going to help you in the future, um, with whatever you face. Hopefully,
Yeah. I think it does in some form or fashion, right? But I think how you frame it, right? Some people are able to really look at those failures and say, wow, man, this made me who I am. And I think some people don't have that innate capability. They look at the failures and they beat themselves up over it and say, I wish I should have done this and that differently. And they sort of focus on the past. So it just depends on everybody, which sort of comes back full circle to the work that we do, which is you've got to meet each person where they're at individually, and there's no cookie cutter. And I think that that's the hardest part sometimes in communicating the value of what we do, is to say that it's not going to work the same for everybody. Not every skill is going to work for everybody. Not every, right. There's no like formula. And I think that makes people uncomfortable because then they're saying, well, why am I investing my time in this? And I don't know what I'm going to get back out of it. So, but that's life. And that's, we carry the message on and hope people will follow us. Um, so I mean, I guess at this, I would sort of ask the same question about how did it manifest when you went from college to professional baseball?
I think those first couple of years, right? It's a transition. I don't think I transitioned very well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a new culture, a new way of living. I'm now, this is my job. Um,
Yeah.
but that transition, playing every day, throwing every day, being on the road,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of thrust into it. And, those transitions really, it took me some time.
Yeah. So in terms of like what it looks like now in the organization that you're in, the Blue Jays, versus when you were drafted, 15 years ago? Um, like, does it look different in terms of the programming or the training that incoming athletes get in terms of navigating those transitions?
Yeah, they have draft camps where they come in and they're kind of given the heads up what to expect and
Mm-hmm.
kind of some baseline education and skills to kind of navigate what's ahead. Um, so yeah, before it was like, okay, here we go. You just figure it out. And now the player support is unbelievable. Um, and if a guy's having trouble with it, they have a lot of different resources, whether it's a dietary concern or working out or, mental performance. There's a lot of things that they
Mm-hmm.
can go to learn how to kind of cope with what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, we've evolved so much in that respect, and having those resources and making them very known and obvious up front is a big part of it, right? It's the landscape has changed so much for the better, but it's still evolving, right? Not every organization in Major League Baseball has the same holistic model that the Blue Jays do.
Yeah, and that's what kind of drew me to the Blue Jays.
Mm-hmm.
I just sensed something was different than anything I ever experienced in professional baseball. Not to say the other organizations were bad. It's just they were like the Blue Jays were doing something different from Mark Shapiro down to, you know, every coach they hired. They all kind of had this common like drive, these values that seeped into everything they did. And it was just the way they did it, this Blue Jays way, this compete together, mastering yourself and being a good teammate. Everybody kind of was in stride with those things. And it was so awesome to see that. And that's still to
Mm-hmm.
this day apparent. And that's what makes me, I go into work every day ready to go because I know everybody there is on the same page and we're going to collaborate and we're going to learn. Um, and it's a really cool thing that the coaches do, and the players are used to it. This is the way they do things.
Yeah, yeah, it's a culture.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the work is understanding like how I could benefit the group. You know, find my place in it, and how do I impact it in a positive way? How do I help build the culture? Sometimes it's me just starting necessary conversations based on what I see, and other times it's really empowering the players to take things and make it their own.
Yeah. So, um, it seems like the Blue Jays are the blueprint, if you will, for what the standard is in Major League Baseball now in terms of what other teams are striving to achieve. And I know there are other organizations that sort of kind of fit into that bucket too, but it seems like the ones that maybe are a little bit further behind the curve are looking at what you're doing and saying like, hey, this is what we want to be.
Yeah, I think the whole community of mental performance in baseball, it's kind of united, and we're
Mm-hmm.
all pulling for this to be, at the best level it could be. So, there's a lot of helping each other provide just the best resources. So it's not one, hey, we got to be
Yeah.
like them. It's like, uh,
Right.
we know based on the industry standards what we need to do to provide this awesome like resource, and it's either like CNPC certified, whatever we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really cool community to be a part of where we're all pushing each other and we're realizing where this whole field was and now where it is. And we have to keep that, even though
Mm-hmm.
we're working with different organizations, we're still working toward that common goal.
Yeah. And it seems that way. And there's a lot more good publicity out there, PR, about mental performance in Major League Baseball in terms of exposure. And that's only going to help, I think, the momentum to build those resources, at a standard that every club has. A couple more questions, and I'll let you move on with move on with your day. So I have to ask one baseball career related question. So, like, when you look back on your career now, like, what do you look back on most fondly? What's the thing you look back and say, man, I'm just so grateful that I had that in my life?
That's a great question. You're gonna have to give me a little
Yeah.
time to think of that. First thing that came to mind was just those moments where I was super appreciative of where I was, whether, it was at the home park or away. There was times where the crowd got so loud and I was at the pinnacle of it, and it was just this like gratitude and just being there and taking it all in and realizing this was a childhood dream achieved. Not many
Mm-hmm.
people get to do that where I want to be a baseball player since I was a young kid. And that same feeling I got when I was at Yankee games is the same feeling I got when I would pitch. So that connection to that childhood dream
Mm-hmm.
and really just taking in that energy is something that I'll cherish forever.
Good answer. Yeah. Um, Yeah, I got goosebumps when you were giving the answer because I think every kid who plays baseball, at a certain level wants to be a pro, and very, very, very few get to experience that. And so looking at that with gratitude and saying like, man, I got to do something that most people don't get to do. That's pretty cool. Last question. So I ask this question all the time. Like, for anybody who's listening, whether it's a parent, an athlete, like what's the one, like if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody who wants to be better, like what would that piece of advice be?
And I think this is my go-to answer to that question recently. It's knowing where you want to go, like having that, holding that loosely, and then doing everything you can in that moment to get there. So when we talk about moment and added results, that doesn't mean you don't have attention to that. Like you don't know where you want to go. It's like, how do you know where you want to go, what you're working towards, and then realizing that today is all I can really focus on.
Right. Right. The word that comes to mind there, and I teach this as well, as alignment, right? Is what you're doing align with what you want? And if you're doing that every day in service of that long term vision, then you've succeeded, right? Because it's not going to happen today. It's going to happen 5 years, 10 years down the line. But if you did everything you could, there you go. Great answer.
Yeah, and I think just the second follow up to that is knowing what you value. Like, what is it about what you want to achieve? How would that be in touch with your values? And as long as you know your values, that compass is going to be heading, north to where it wants to go. I think we get so caught up in emotions, it gets us away from what we want to do. If we listen too much to that voice, it can kind of pull us away. But if we stay true to our values, um, that's ultimately going to get us to where we want to go, regardless if we get there.
Excellent. All right. So we'll end on that note. John, thanks so much to come on. It was great to see you again. I miss you.
I
And
miss you
let's hopefully when the world one day becomes normal again, let's come down to spring training and say hi.
for sure, man. I'd love to have you.
All
Good to see
right.
you, man.
Take care.